The opioid epidemic is one of the largest health crises facing the United States today. An estimated 115 Americans die each day due to an opioid overdose, and with research suggesting that the epidemic has not reached its peak, dire consequences could potentially lie ahead. As a pharmacist or other pharmacy or healthcare professional, it's imperative to know how your practice can directly affect the tide of this national health crisis. The current epidemic is rooted in prescribing practices developed in the early 1990s, but traces of that epidemic lead back even further. A letter published in the New England Journal of Medicine in January of 1980 claimed that out of nearly 12,000 patients treated with opioids, the risk for development of addiction was rare unless the patient had a prior history of addiction. Subsequent studies in the 80s and early 90s claimed similar addiction rarity to such an extent that when OxyContin was introduced in the mid-1990s, the vast majority of prescribers had been lulled into a false sense of security in the prescribing of opioids. From there, the epidemic's growth has been astronomical. The opioid crisis has reached such proportions that in October of 2017, the federal government declared it a national health emergency and extended the declaration in April of 2018. But declarations of public health emergencies last only 90 days, and despite renewing the declaration, the federal government has been under increasing pressure to act, with some addiction advocates asserting that the country isn't doing enough to stem the crisis. But this is not just a problem at the national level. As a pharmacist, you can have a positive influence to help combat this crisis at the ground level. You have the ability, based on your professional judgment, to discuss appropriate pharmaceutical therapy with the prescriber and the patient, and to educate your patients on the potential adverse effects of opioids and other highly abused drugs. You also have significant oversight in your pharmacy's inner workings, and this is what we'll take a closer look at. How to minimize thefts and losses of drugs in the pharmacy, particularly in regard to employee pilferage and drug diversion. The topic of drug diversion has been one of great concern to the Texas State Board of Pharmacy for decades. In recent years, with Texas experiencing the opioid epidemic along with the rest of the country, the board has continued its efforts to addressing this serious issue. Drug diversion includes any situation where drugs are redirected from the legitimate processes in place for drug distribution and dispensing. As part of a team providing medical care to patients, pharmacists and pharmacies are the last stop before prescription drugs reach the patients, or, as often is the case, before prescription drugs get to a person seeking them without a valid medical need. In addition, almost daily, the board receives notifications of theft and loss of controlled substances from pharmacies, with explanations ranging from burglaries, armed robberies, and losses in transit, to employee pilferage, where employees in the pharmacy are stealing or otherwise fraudulently obtaining the drugs. Within the last year, the board received approximately 140 reports of drugs stolen by a pharmacist, a technician, or other employee in the facility. Again, these diversions can result in the drugs being taken for personal use or for resale on the streets. Regardless, the diversion of controlled substances increases the potential for abuse, dependence, and overdose. Why is it important that pharmacies and pharmacists recognize and prevent drug diversion? Because pharmacists, as healthcare providers, have a professional duty to keep their patients and their community safe from the misuse of prescription drugs, particularly those with potential for abuse, dependence, and overdose. Examining the risk for diversion at your pharmacy is an important step to prevent your pharmacy from being a target for break-ins and to prevent employees from pilfering the drug inventory from the pharmacy. The board wants to ensure that each pharmacist and pharmacy owner has the tools to effectively reduce and, potentially, eliminate employee pilferage and drug diversion. Some things you can do are ensure your pharmacy has appropriate security procedures, create a robust policies and procedures manual designed to minimize opportunities for pilferage, and conduct self-audits of your pharmacy at regular and frequent intervals. Continue on to the other videos in this playlist to explore these 3 key steps.